Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you. Are you a Black woman who is struggling with perfectionism and it's leading to burnout? That is what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Camesha Jones Brandon. I am a licensed clinical social worker, recovering workaholic, and burnout overcomer. Moving Beyond Burnout empowers Black women to cultivate self-awareness and develop practical pathways to overcome burnout for good. So today I have a special guest, L'Oreal Thompson Payton, who you're going to learn all about her work and her experience with perfectionism. And so if you are joining us for the first time, please like the video, share on all the platforms, and comment. We would love to hear you all's thoughts and questions throughout this live stream today. So, as I said, the topic is how to overcome perfectionism to beat burnout. And so I have L'Oreal Thompson Payton here. And first, just to kick things off, L'Oreal, if you could share about like who you are, your relationship to perfectionism, and how did it impact your mental health?
All great questions. So my name is L'Oreal, as Camesha mentioned. I'm the author of Stop Waiting for Perfect. It came out last year, all about overcoming perfectionism, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and things that, quite honestly, I still struggle with, even though I wrote a book about it. So it's very real, very peer-to-peer in that way. I'm also a journalist, a health and wellness reporter, and I am a certified yoga instructor and book coach. So I'm just all about helping women, but especially Black women, especially those of us who are highly ambitious, overachievers, workaholic, perfectionists, find some more balance in our lives. And my story with perfectionism, it's a lifelong relationship at this point. We're going on 37 years, I feel like, of going together. It's been a huge part of my life. Dating back to grade school, I think, was sort of the impetus of it, right? I was the straight A student. I was the honor roll. I was valedictorian of my 8th grade class, and just always, and school came very naturally to me. Like, I enjoyed learning. I loved going to school, but there was something about the like positive attention that you would get from your teachers and other adults in your life that kind of fed into this like, okay, well, I have to maintain this. And even though my parents would iterate, like, just do your best, that's all we care about, I put the pressure on myself to always be the straight A student, the honor roll, and everything, like just collecting all of these accolades, because even as a child, I equated them to my self-worth. And so I wore perfectionism as this badge of honor, right? You go to job interviews and they're like, tell us about a weakness or something. It's like, well, I'm a perfectionist. And not realizing that, perfectionism isn't the solution. It's a stressor, actually. And striving for this perfection, keeping up this facade in every facet of my life, right? From being the perfect daughter, sister, friend, wife, and now mother, began to take its toll on my mental health, because you're just constantly moving that benchmark for yourself. Nothing is ever enough. And so it just, and it's unrealistic. Like, it just doesn't exist. Perfectionism doesn't exist. And striving to be perfect in every facet of your life is a one-way ticket to burnout and exhaustion. And that's exactly what happened to me around this time. Last year, I had hit a wall between working a 9 to 5, in a newsroom, promoting my first book while also taking care of my daughter. And my therapist was like, I'm starting to notice some depressive symptoms and, fatigue, irritability, not enjoying the things that I used to do. But the wake up call for me was not having the energy to play with my daughter, Violet. And for those who are familiar with our story, know that we endured several rounds of IVF in order to have her. So it's like, I did not spend all of this time, energy, and money on having this baby and not be able to be fully present with her and enjoy the time that I do get to spend with her. So that was my aha Oprah moment, if you will. And when I realized I needed to take a step back and really rethink my relationship with perfectionism.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, L'Oreal. And I really resonate with how perfectionism is a stressor and how you're constantly moving the bar. And it's also what you really connected really well was achievement and how achievement, perfectionism, and stress, how they all play together. For you, when you really started to notice like the connection between perfectionism, stress, and your mental health, were there any things that like you did or any moments that really helped you to kind of try to kind of shift or do things differently after like what you just shared in your story?
Yeah, I mean, going back even further, literally a month after Violet was born. So I have a healthier relationship now with Peloton. But when I first started, my bike was delivered January 2020. It was before the pandemic, before we started in earnest our fertility treatments, and that just became kind of my safe place, right? In a world that was literally spiraling around me, that was the one thing that I could control, and I held on to that so dearly. And began to measure my self-worth. And you earn these little blue dots for every workout that you do in the Peloton app. So no matter if it's a meditation, yoga, strength class, guided walk, whatever, you earn these blue dots. And I was so obsessed, and I can look back on this now and laugh, but it wasn't very funny at the time, that I was doing one of the guided meditations at 3 o'clock in the morning on the way to the hospital the morning of our scheduled C-section, because I didn't want to lose my streak. And as soon as I got the okay to walk around the hallways, I was listening on the app to the guided walks and just, maintaining the streak by any means necessary. And there was one day, I think it was one of her wellness checks, and we got home and there was a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And at 12:01 a.m., when the clock reset, I realized that I hadn't logged a workout in for the day and started crying, because now who am I and what am I worth if I don't have this? I think it was like 600 something days. I forget exactly. But it was a while, because it had been almost 2 years of everyday logging in. And it was essentially like a gold star for adults, right? For working out. And I was addicted to that validation, but also to have something to show for it. Like, hey, look how good of a person I am, that I'm able to juggle this career and this baby and also make time for myself and work out. Like, in theory, it should be this noble thing, but in practice, it was very unhealthy. And in talking to a therapist about it, and even a story that I wrote for it for Well and Good. And I remember my editor asking, like, so what was really like, what was the reasoning? And that control, that sense of control, because when you're a perfectionist, you have to maintain the facade, the appearance and everything, so that you can seem like you have it all together to everyone else, even if you're really struggling on the inside. And there's always that inner critic, right? That's telling you you're not good enough. You don't deserve to be here. What are you doing? Everyone's going to figure it out. So those things that you can control, like a daily workout streak or Duolingo, like whatever, like all these apps have these streaks, but they don't account for our humanity, right? There are sick days. There's days when you have to go pick up the kid from daycare in the middle of the day, and it derails, your entire day. And I have learned from that experience that A, it's not that serious. B, no one cares really, like outside of me. And that C, that is not this moral indicator that I made it out to be. Like, I'm still the same L'Oreal. I'm still worthy of love and grace and goodness and every good thing, with or without the streak on an app. And so it was this kind of, and parenting itself certainly has awakened my eyes that there's, no such thing as perfectionism in parenting. And also, I don't want to pass that anxiety on to my daughter. So I have to model that self-care. My therapist is always asking me, she's like, what do you want Violet to do? And so then you have to do that. Like I have to do that and model it not only for her, but for me as well. And so like she's been the best accountability buddy in that regard, even though, she's just two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for many people, especially when it comes to something like perfectionism and burnout, like hitting rock bottom is when a lot of times we get our wake up call.
Yeah.
And perfectionism, I don't want to say it's a scam because everybody says it's a scam, but that's the only
Hmm.
thing I can think of at this moment.
Yeah.
But it's like almost I don't want to say a limiting or false belief that we can be perceived or that our worth is directly tied to how we show up, how we appear to others, how we look.
Hmm.
And so to maintain that, whatever those standards or those things are, that can be exactly what you shared, a part of almost going into a spiral,
Yes.
or just a cycle of stress, burnout, challenges with mental health to
Hmm.
show and keep it all together. I know we have your wonderful book, Stop Waiting for Perfect. And then also, I want to ask this about you being a yoga teacher as well.
Mm.
How have you helped other Black women kind of work through overcoming perfectionism through your work as a writer, a journalist, but also, I don't know if you use it within your yoga practice, but
Mhm.
yeah, how do you help women to kind of get through what you've been through in terms of overcoming perfectionism?
Yeah, I start with authenticity. I don't know how to be any other way. So I'm very candid in my experiences, especially as a Black woman, because I know, going back to 2016 and when I started therapy, my, well meaning relatives are like, oh, you don't need that. You have a husband and family and friends who love and care for you. And I was like, I didn't say I didn't, right? But there was, back then, especially this stigma around mental health and therapy, especially, right? It was very much, like you go to church and you pray and like that should be enough. And I was like, what? Well, stay with me. What if I go to church on Sunday, I can also go to therapy on Monday, right? Like you can do both. It's a both and, it's not one or the other. One doesn't cancel out the other. And so I was very honest in writing about that for an essay that I did for Hello Giggles at the time, because I just wanted to, my whole goal in everything that I do, from my writing to speaking engagements and my yoga, is to help other people, but especially other Black women, feel less alone. And that's the same reason I wanted to write about our fertility journey, because I would look around and I didn't really see a lot of people who looked like us. At the fertility clinic, I didn't see any Black or brown babies on that kind of like bulletin board of success. And so it kind of paints this picture. Well, you've been told your whole life as a Black woman that you're hyperfertile anyway. So when you run into issues, it's kind of like, well, what's wrong with me? What's going on? I don't know anyone in my family who's talked about this. IVF is seen as something, that's for other people. That's not for us. We don't need that. You just need to pray. And I was like, no, I want to explore this. And I want for other Black women to feel less alone by sharing our story. And I did that in real time. Like I would keep people up to date on what was going on, because it would have been really easy to, once all is said and done and she's here, to be like, oh, hey, and this nice pregnancy announcement. But I wanted to share kind of this messy middle as it was happening, because I didn't know how the story was going to turn out. But I did know that I didn't want anyone to feel the way that I did. And that was kind of my whole reason to becoming a journalist in the first place, reading all these teen magazines growing up. And it's Britney, Christina, you're right. It's before Beyonce was Beyonce, before Michelle was an Obama. So there wasn't, Black Girl Magic wasn't a hashtag, it wasn't trending. And then when it comes to yoga, especially, that's also another wellness space that has been very white for a very long time, and honestly still is. I mean, if you Google yoga teacher, you're very likely to see a whole page full of thin white women who clearly do not look like me and people that I know. And so, and it's funny because I was just doing a yoga practice with Chelsea Jackson Roberts on the Peloton app, but she is a Black woman yoga instructor. And I very much believe in that, being the change that you want to see. And so I did my training with that in mind. I didn't necessarily aspire to teach yoga right away. I just wanted to deepen my own knowledge and practice and understanding of, this practice that I had been doing for so many years. And what I love about yoga especially is that it is a practice. It is never going to be perfect. I'm going to show up differently on the mat today than I was yesterday because my energy may be different. My body may be, feeling different. And so I want to encourage other Black women through that, like that's a place where you can practice letting go of the perfectionism, right? You don't have to get the handstand and all the fancy complicated poses. Like there's so many other aspects to yoga besides the poses. And I really do stress that in my classes. Like if you show up and you just want to lay down in Shavasana or go into child's pose for the whole class, that is yoga. And that's enough. It's this space to be and to breathe. And especially for Black women, we need those safe spaces where we can let our guard down, where we don't have to work twice as hard to get half as much, and we can just honor ourselves and our bodies. And that's what I aim to do in my yoga teaching as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And you're exactly right. Like yoga, the word, that is used is it is a practice. And I think that's a great way to look at life. It is practice.
Mm-hmm.
It is not perfect.
Yeah.
One of my friends, he had in his signature always learning. And how amazing would it be if most of us adapted that mindset that we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always shifting and changing, and that there isn't necessarily this destination, that has all the rainbows and flowers and, all the things that look and feel good. And I think also, like, as we grow older as Black women, I think we start to understand that more.
Yes.
Because when you're younger, it's almost like, oh, if I have this, if I have that, if I have this by this age and that by that age, then I have it all together. But as you're growing and maturing and just lifing, you experience things that are different. And I think it's so important, just like through the work that you do, is to show that all of us are in a messy middle. Like none of us have it all together, and that is okay. And that is about being human and respecting and honoring our humanity. So with Stop Waiting for Perfect, I know you talk about imposter syndrome, and also not feeling like you have to have it all together to get started, to change your life, to do, what your gifts or talents or what you feel led to share with the world. Could you talk a little bit more about imposter syndrome and how that connects to perfectionism, and ways that Black women who are experiencing imposter syndrome and are experiencing burnout, trying to keep it all together, how they can begin to work through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that imposter syndrome has kind of gotten a bad rep lately. There are a lot of, deserved criticism of that. The traditional definition or, the origins of it, these two clinical psychologists, Susan Himes and Pauline Clance, studied these college educated white women and found that the imposter syndrome that they were feeling was this sense of, you have these high achievers here who still question their achievements despite this, track record of success. And I definitely identified with that. I remember walking into my first day on the job as a director of communications for a national education nonprofit, being like, oh no. Like I felt like I had, duped them in the interview and that I wasn't qualified. Whereas in the interview itself, I had asked, like, there was a question on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself? And I was like, a 12. And I'm basically like the Olivia Pope of nonprofit PR, like was super confident then. And then walking into the office, started to question myself, was feeling a lot of that imposter syndrome. And where I think that, the criticism comes in is that a lot of times, oftentimes, the imposter syndrome that we're feeling is actually compounded by the racism and sexism and any other ism that you are experiencing. And so I very much believe, both things can be true. I know there was a whole movement to, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh, wait, don't speak for me because I know the definition and I know that that has been my experience. And it is also coupled with, oftentimes being a young Black woman in the workforce. And so both of those things can be true. And I mean, we saw it very much live and well on Tuesday night during the presidential debate, because here we have a extremely qualified woman of color, Black woman, South Asian woman. And I just remember watching, because it was everything that I had talked about, right? In the sense of working twice as hard to get half as much, because Black women don't get the luxury to be mediocre. We can't be messy in the workplace. We can't be incompetent. We can't show up with concepts of the plan. Okay. We have the plan, the outline, the directives, the details, everything in there, because we don't get that luxury because of the systemic racism and sexism that we face uniquely, being at the intersection of those two. And so there is you can continue along the hamster wheel like I did for many, many years in my career. And I reached this breaking point, at that previous role that I mentioned during the performance review, where I had exceeded every goal, every metric. And yet on the rating thing, it said met expectations. And I was like, how did I exceed the goal, but only met expectations? And it was then that I realized it's never going to be enough, right? Like, I'm pushing and I'm climbing and I'm trying to get this promotion. I'm trying to be recognized. I want, the pay raise and everything that comes with that, but at what cost? Because I was, burnt out. And which is ironic, because being a health and wellness reporter, it's like, I should know better. And I didn't do better. And I saw on LinkedIn, actually, there was this 12 stages of burnout graphic, and I was hovering at a close 11.5. The stage 11, I just pulled it up. It was like, you feel depressed, lost, and completely exhausted. And stage 12 was you mentally and physically collapse and experience full burnout. So I don't want anyone to get to stage 12, Black women especially. And a lot of that is removing ourselves from that hamster wheel. And it's often easier said than done, right? We all got bills to pay. We got mortgage, we got daycare, and so forth and so on. And a lot of times, because you're spending 40 plus hours, in your career, in your job, or whatever that might be, that is a lot of time to be in what are often toxic environments. And so if you can look at that, of course, try to have the conversations, with your manager or whoever the powers may be, to incorporate more of that work-life balance, instilling boundaries and upholding them as well, so that, you're not working 12 hours a day. But if you've had those conversations and nothing has changed, it might be time to start looking around. And that's what I did. I ended up going back to full-time freelance writing. But I'm, obviously open if anything else comes along, but it has to be the right fit, and it has to be somewhere that I, will be able to thrive and not just survive. So within the book, there's these exercises for people, writing a breakup letter to your inner critic, because oftentimes that holds us back. Or we're like, well, once the kids are in school, or once I do this, once I do that, there is never going to be the perfect moment to get started, to write that book, to launch that podcast, to change careers, to travel the world. And so it's not about doing it perfectly, but it's about getting started, taking that risk, taking that chance on yourself, because you deserve better. And sometimes you just need that little push. And that's what the book is meant to be, is that pocket-sized pep talk to help guide you through these different obstacles, about owning your stories, celebrating your progress, and giving yourself grace, which society does not extend to Black women. So we oftentimes have to do it for ourselves. And doing that, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to be held and supported by other people, seeking out support through therapy, through coaches, whatever that might be, but recognizing that you are deserving of support, that you don't have to do it all by yourself. You do not need to be a strong Black woman 24/7 is really eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even what you touched on Tuesday, I was like, is this real life? Like this We got
Girl.
someone who is like mediocre, who's
Yeah.
unhinged, and we have someone who looks very presidential,
And
you
it's so
know?
frustrating because she has to
Yeah,
take him seriously. She has to
yeah.
be
Mm,
mindful of her facial expressions. She has to. And I know she was this close to calling him outside that name in that one part where she was like, and this former president. And it
yeah.
was just like, I resonated with that so much because how often have Black women been seated across from this mediocre white man who doesn't deserve to be there, and yet your qualifications are questioned. Everything that you do is under scrutiny. You have to constantly prove yourself. You need to be over prepared. And we know that it's not fair. And that really put on an international stage, really, what it
Mm,
is that Black women go through on an everyday basis.
yes, yes. And yeah, just so many thoughts about that. Yeah, it's something that we go through because of how, like you said, we don't receive the amount of grace or even luxury to make mistakes, or not even just to make mistakes, but just to show up anything except overqualified or put together or all these different things and still get
Yeah.
scrutinized. So I know you kind of finished off offering some like words of support or
Mhm.
affirmation, but are there any other uh, support or words of affirmation that you'd like to offer Black women who are struggling with perfectionism and burnout right now?
Definitely. And the can be summarized into, you are enough as you are right here, right now. You're more than enough, and you always have been, and you always will be. And I know the world try to makes us feel like we're not, or that we have to be everything to everyone, and we don't. Your worth is not tied to how much you achieve and how flawless you may appear. Like, rest is not a reward, it's your birthright. And so it is okay, it is encouraged to set boundaries, to say no, and to put yourself first. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be you, because that's your superpower. That's what you can do. That's different from anyone else out there. And the example I always go back to, we were hiking in Hawaii about a year. Yeah, Violet had just turned a year old, and I had done this hike before up Diamond Head. Um, much different with a 20-some-pound toddler strapped to your back. And as we're going to like the next to last summit, and I can see the staircase, like I can see the top, and I just don't have it in me. Everything is saying like push through, push through, push through, and I'm just like, no, no, because I heard my therapist in the back of my head saying, what would you want Violet to do? I would want her to turn around, go sit down, and care for herself. And so that's exactly what I did. I handed her off to my sister, caught my breath, drank my water, and I turned to her. She's 13 months old at this time, so doesn't really understand what I'm saying. But I was like, it's important. Like, mommy is really tired right now. And it's important for us to honor our body and our boundaries and rest when we need to, because I didn't see that modeled, right? Like my mom, and granted, circumstances being what they are, generations before us didn't have that luxury as well, right? To really invest in their self-care and mental health and everything like that. And so I want to show my daughter a different way. And I encourage, even if you don't have children, your inner self, like what did 5-year-old Camesha need? Do that for her, and the world will be a better place.
Yes, I love it. And I just also appreciate the intergenerational perspective, because we are setting the expectations for the next generation. We are their models. And so, how we respond to stress, or how we show our self worth and take care of our mental health, it's not just us who are watching, it's the
Yeah.
ones who are coming after us as well. So I really love how you talk to your daughter, and even if she's young, but just to model that
Mm-hmm.
mom's tired, we don't have to continue. It is okay.
Yeah.
And that being enough, and
Yeah.
just period, we are enough, and we don't have to continue to strive or try to fit into these boxes or unrealistic expectations. So thank you so much, L'Oreal. I
Thank
really enjoyed
you.
everything that you shared. And how can people get connected to you? Where can people find your book? Yeah, share all those things.
All the things. I'm at LT in the City everywhere, primarily Twitter and Instagram. Website's also ltinthecity.com, where you can sign up for my weekly motivational newsletter. Stop Waiting for Perfect is available anywhere books are sold. And I also narrate the audiobook if you're more of a listener than a reader. And yeah, feel free to, share with others, drop into my DMs, continue to have these kinds of conversations with your family and friends. I think that's, how we implement change and support each other. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much, L'Oreal. I appreciated all of your insights, just sharing your experiences. And with Moving Beyond Burnout, we are here. Well, I can't say we, but I. I am here, every Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Time. Next week, I'm going to be talking about weathering. And this is a more around research that has come out about Black women and how the amounts of stress that we experience age us and also impact us because of the systems that intersect that impact our lives experiences. So I'm going to be talking more about what weathering is, what to do if you're experiencing or in the midst of weathering, because I think it's important that we talk about these systemic and the health implications of stress. So I will be here same time, same place next week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you again to L'Oreal, and take care of all of you and be well.
Thanks.